update. And then Matt, I feel like you're good with people just kind of interrupting and asking questions. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started today with Buyers Club Live. For those of you who haven't been around for Matt's quarterly market updates, Matt is a phenomenal broker here in the St. Louis area. He's with Magnolia Real Estate, which I am a super big fan of. And I think a lot of us on the call, I see a lot of Magnolia agents on here. So anyways, Matt is just going to share about where he sees the market at right now in St. Louis. He's very involved in the market. If you have any questions that come up as he's talking, feel free to jump in, and then we'll save time for conversation as well at the end. But Matt, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you and go from there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Suzanne. Thanks for always having me on. It's one of my favorite talks to do. Yeah, it's things have changed a little bit since we met last, and we've kind of been talking about a plateau and all this other stuff, and we're seeing it, that's for sure. But I want to kind of start off real quick, just throwing it out to the group. Which market in the country is doing the best right now? What do we think? If you're thinking about regions in the United States, which one is doing the best?
The Midwest.
Midwest.
Okay. Typically, Midwest is a good answer because we normally are the last ones to see some of the biggest shifts and that kind of stuff. But there is a different region that's doing even better than us right now. And it is the East Coast. From Oregon. That is, yes. The Northeast, not the Southeast, but the Northeast is doing phenomenal right now. So we're seeing gains in the Northeast higher than anywhere else in the country on your median sale price. Yeah, absolutely. New York, Maryland, Delaware, those are all really high. We're seeing upwards to almost 6% increases in some zip codes in New York year over year on prices. So Morgan, keep your fingers crossed. That house is going to sell this week. I guarantee it. So
that would be amazing. I hope so.
When you were talking, we were getting started, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to make her day because her house is the only place right now in the country that is seeing these numbers.
And I used to live in Delaware too.
See, there you go. So numbers look phenomenal in the Northeast right now. And then coming in second is, of course, the Midwest. We are still doing strong and we're looking great. Anybody want to tell me what the worst state to sell a house in right now in the country is?
California.
California.
Arizona.
Florida.
Florida, it sucks. If you are looking for an investment property and you want to get a house or a condo cheaper than you ever have before, you should really look at Florida right now. So Florida's numbers are absolutely terrible, especially those that border the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, whatever you want to call it. It is those cities and zip codes over there are just tanking. And part of that is because of the insurance. Part of that is there's just so much going on in Florida right now. So if you've got some cash and you can sit tight for a little while on a property, Florida might be your destination to go. So Florida right now is looking bad. Our market in general, we're about 2% year over year increase. So we have seen that increase. But I think everybody on this call, if you have sold a house or if you have bought a house here in the last 6 months, you know that we are seeing that plateau. And so one of the coolest stats that I thought we talk about, anybody want to take a guess in June, what was the percentage of closings in June that happened over asking price? They sold the house in the St. Louis market over asking price. What was the percentage?
25%.
Oh, Suzanne, you doomsday prepper. That's terrible. No, not even close.
50?
About 50%, 48%. Okay.
Wow.
48% in June sold over asking price, closed over asking price. Now, we're like, yep, that's pretty awesome. Almost 50% of the houses. Well, that's terrible compared to what we've seen the last 4 years. So in 2021, 65% of closings happened over asking price, 65%. So we are under that 50% mark. So now here's my question. Let's see how good the realtors are out there. What percentage of realtors listed a house and sold it for the list price? How many houses in June in the St. Louis market were listed exactly where they were going to sell? What percentage?
30.
10%? Okay, I'm seeing 10. What'd you say, Suzanne?
30.
30? Man, you give us way too much credit.
18%.
18%. Emily's the closest. We were at 6%. 6% of houses that were listed by agents sold for that price, for the list price in June. Okay. So let's talk about the percentage of houses then that's left that sold under asking price in June. So we were at 46% of houses in June in our market sold under asking price. So 3 years ago, we were selling 65% of our houses over asking price, and now we're at a 50-50 split pretty much of over versus under. And so that to me is very telling. So even though our year-over-year numbers are 2% up, we're showing an increase. We have to be very, very careful on where we price that if we want that house to sell. And, you know, Morgan, we were chatting right before the call started in your mom's house, you know, and you're saying, Mom, you've been listed for 60 days, drop the price. You know, there's a lot of people that are still out there looking at these houses and they're saying, well, I don't think I should have to drop the price because my neighbor's house and 3 other houses in our subdivision last year sold at this price. Yeah, last year. We're in a little bit of a shifting market. And so we've got to make sure that those pricings are happening the way they should. And we got to, I mean, just have to be super cognizant about where stuff is selling right now. And also, you know, our days on market, we're still phenomenal. We are still like averaging in our market, we're averaging around like 6 or 7 days, which is still crazy because like across the country right now, the average is like 19 or 20. And, you know, we should be very, very lucky that we're not in some of these other areas of the country. We talked about how Florida is seeing terrible numbers, but that's all over the South and over in California, they're all down. All those numbers are down across the board. And so when we look at the Midwest, we're still holding steady with our pricing, but we are seeing those days on market tick up. I currently have a client who has a house for sale in Georgia. And her agent told her they're just outside of the Atlanta market. And she said, our average days on market right now to sell your house in Georgia are about 60. So plan on 60 days. We have a client, we have a house that we have under contract with a contingent offer, and they have a house to sell in Michigan. They are just outside of Detroit, and their agent told them you need to plan on 65 to 75 days before you go under contract, which isn't terrible in a normal traditional real estate market. I mean, you know, I see Dustin shaking his head, and when he got into this, you know, it was, you know, we told our clients 3, 4, maybe 5 months on market, you know, and that was pretty typical. So the fact that we've been able to sell houses in 48 hours for the last 5 years is insane. And it's also giving buyers a chance to breathe. You know, buyers are, you know, we're getting calls from our sellers who are like, it's been a weekend and you didn't sell my house. Yeah, you've got 30 people interested in your house, but they're all taking a breath because they know that they don't have to get an offer submitted within the first 30 minutes of it hitting the market right now. So there's still competition, don't get me wrong. And there's still houses seeing multiple offers, but we're not seeing 35 or 40 offers like we were a couple of years ago. So, you know, that pricing aspect of things right now is so important. And you can really watch it because we have so many clients, and I've talked to so many agents that they said, well, I told my client to list here and they wanted to list here. And after a month on the market, we dropped it to here where I wanted it to be, and we got multiple offers. And it's just because those buyers, they're being more picky, and they definitely don't want to get into a bidding war where if that seller prices it at the higher range, they still think they got to go in over asking to get it, and it scares people. And so they kind of back it down.
Roger Wallach.
What's that? No, someone unmuted. So So we keep seeing that. 3,600 new listings in the St. Louis market in June. So that's a huge number for us. It's up 2% from last year. So we're definitely seeing a little bit more, houses hitting the market. Days depending, like I said, is still hovering around 6. Total inventory for June in the St. Louis market was a little over 8,500 houses, around 8,500 houses. That's up 9% year over year from last year. So again, we're seeing those inventory numbers tick up, which is giving buyers more options, which is the other reason why they're not, submitting an offer in the first 30 minutes it's out there, because they actually have stuff to look at, which is something we haven't seen in a while. But because they have more to look at, they've got more to compare it to. And so, that's the other thing is, if you had a seller that was trying to get rid of their house without cutting their grass or vacuuming their carpets, 3 years ago, that worked. Now, buyers are able to take 5 minutes and compare because there's 2 or 3 other houses in the subdivision for sale. And so we're seeing that quite a bit. And there's still a lot of agents that are out there and realtors that aren't reading the data the way that you guys are and the way that we look at it. And so they're like, oh, well, there were houses in here in this subdivision selling last year for 600. So let's put you at 600. But when you dive into the data, that house should really be $50,000 less. And so it's really putting sellers in a tough spot. So we're seeing that, and the new inventory that's hitting the market is good, and we need more of those options. Unfortunately, part of that is what plateaus those prices. And so, we're not going to see a 6% increase in home values in Missouri this year. I think we'll probably end the year at about 2%, maybe 3%. We'll see how the fall goes. We had a more active summer so far than we've seen the past couple summers. But we still feel across the board that buyers are enjoying their summers. They're traveling, they're taking their kids on vacation, and they're not as hell-bent to buy a house before school starts. They're okay making that move and that transition during the school year, which is something we haven't seen in a while. So that's something else to look at. The other thing that, of course, all of us continue to watch, and I think we've been talking about it now for 2 years, is when are we going to see rates drop? Sweet baby Jesus, if they could just drop the rate just a little bit, like that's what we need. So that's continuing to drive a lot of these buyers' decisions, and we're continuing to see I don't know how much more the media can talk about the Fed and the rate and Trump, and it's every single day it's the same story, yet we don't see this rate drop that we've all been expecting, right? Every time we do one of these calls, everybody's like, all right, next quarter it's happening. Okay, let's go to another quarter, we're going to say it's going to happen again. And at this point in time, I think Jerome Powell is just like, you know what, I kind of like being in charge, so I'm just going to do what I want. So we continue to see that inventory. Brian, you mentioned data on flips. One thing that I have seen recently, and I've talked to a lot of agents about this, is because of the increased inventory, buyers now have that additional time to go compare apples to apples and flips to flips. I can't tell you how many different flippers I've talked to here recently where they've had the same person come back through their house 2 or 3 times, and the agent's like, we're on our second showing, we're on our third showing. And it's because they're going from your flip to another flip, and they're comparing whose is better before they make their offer. And so we continue to see that. And that level of product that you put out there, I think is so huge, because they have the time now to digest what you've put out versus what else is out there. And so, and then they're also looking at, do I want to pay a little bit more and buy a house that you've already completed? Or am I willing to put a little sweat equity into a house that maybe needs some carpet or paint? And so we're seeing more and more of that. So that's one of the things that we're seeing there. I know there was another chat put in there. Let me see if I can see it. Let's see here. One showing, one offer on a flip around. Hey, it's a couple weeks. Yeah. So that's definitely something. And that's one thing that I will say is that if you truly believe in your price that you've priced it right and you're where the market should be, and I mean, that means you've done your homework, your agent has done their homework, don't drop the price in the first 5 days. Give it some time, guys. We can sell these houses at the price as long as it's priced right. It might take a couple weeks, it might take 30 days. But don't be too jumpy with that price. You know, give it that time and see what happens. If you're not getting any activity at all, if you can't get a single showing, if the data in the MLS is showing that nobody's looking at your house, then maybe it is time to make that adjustment. But if you're confident in that price, sit tight, especially if you got people going through it. It'll sell. It might not happen in the first 48 hours. So that's what I would say on that side of things. The other thing I would say, how many of you guys watch, if you list a property, or if you're an agent and you list for people, how many of you look at your activity on Zillow? If you've got a property out there, you look at it, right? So I mean, as an agent on the traditional side, if I list somebody's house, I can guarantee they are out there critiquing my job as their agent based on how many people are looking at their house in Zillow, right? And it happens all the time. Funniest fact, stat, whatever you want to call it, that I just heard recently is the majority of people that are out there on Zillow daily, liking houses and favoriting houses and doing all that stuff, are people that are sitting in a house with a 3% interest rate who are like, you know what, man, if rates would just come down 3%, I could go out and do this. So those numbers are, you know, we all know those numbers are a little skewed. I've got a $1.9 million listing out there right now, and my people are like, look at all these buyers looking at my house. And I said, they're not looking at your house to buy it. They're looking at your house thinking about what they would do if they won the lottery. That's what they're thinking. So those numbers are always skewed. But if you think about that and think about the millions of people that are sitting out there right now across the country in homes with an interest rate at 2.5 or 3% that have zero intention of moving, but they're out there liking every single house you put out there on Zillow, you know, those numbers are skewed. So you gotta really be able to separate from that. And the biggest thing, if you're trying to sell a house, is ask your realtor, compare those numbers on Zillow to what we're seeing in our local MLS. How similar are those numbers? Because the ones that are in the MLS, yeah, you got some people that are set up on auto searches and that kind of stuff that probably will never buy a house. But the people that are in the MLS, the people that are actively working with realtors, they're going to probably buy something here in the near future. And so if those numbers are two different levels compared to Zillow and the MLS, it's definitely something to take a look at and to consider when you're talking about how quickly that house is going to sell and how much traction you're getting. So I just thought that was very interesting because, you know, there's so many people sitting out there right now, and we hear it all the time. Man, I would love to get a bigger house, but my interest rate right now is 3%, and I just don't want to take on a 7% interest rate just so I can get an extra bedroom. You know, it's just not that good. So we continue to see that kind of stuff going on. And then the other thing that I think is very interesting, and this is going to be something to watch, is a lot of politicians have taken note of what you guys do as flippers and investors. And they're seeing the numbers that you guys are pulling on these older subdivisions and what you're doing with some of those older developments that are out there. You know, I'm talking like the 700 to 900 square foot, 3-bedroom, 1-bath houses that you guys are now selling for $250,000 to $300,000 each. And they're saying, we don't have enough of those. And so right now I've got several different municipalities, several different areas across the St. Louis region that are looking at adding to their master plans for their city in their planning and zoning, smaller developments. How can we convince and motivate builders in our area to go back to building a 900 square foot house that's 3 bedrooms and 1 bath? And most of the builders that are out there saying the numbers don't make sense, and we all agree with that. I mean, you guys have flipped a house. You know what it costs to flip a house. Think if you had to frame it and drywall the whole thing and put a foundation in, numbers don't work very well. But a lot of the conversations that I continue to have are with people that see the products that you guys put out, and they're like, man, that makes sense if we can do that. How can we do more of those? Because that's what we need more of, is more of those priced houses, those starter homes. You know, your average sale price in several of the counties around St. Charles, every single county or every single zip code in St. Charles County right now, the average home price is anywhere between $390,000 and $600,000. So when you look at those numbers, people that want their kids to buy houses in St. Charles County, they can't. They're not happening. But then when you look at Warren County, the average sale price in Warren County now is over $350, and that never used to be the case. St. Louis County, St. Louis County is so interesting because it's so big and there's so many different levels across St. Louis County. But the average prices in St. Louis County continue to hover close to 300,000. And, so we continue to see those different ranges, and people are taking notice of, maybe we do need to go back to some of those smaller homes. We all raised our kids in 3 bedrooms, 1 bath. Why does every house we build right now have to be 4,000 square feet? And is there a way that we can kind of make some changes there? So we continue to see that kind of stuff go on as well in the market. One thing that I think we also have to pay very close attention to is how and when we do make those price reductions on a house. Brian, I'm gonna go to you. You guys sell quite a few. When you guys are gonna make a price reduction on a house, where's your mind go? Do you cut big or do you cut small on your prices?
I don't know if you're talking to me, Matt, but we never cut prices. I mean, we always get what we want. So
yeah, well, that's because your agent's phenomenal. So I mean,
I mean, seriously, on our flips, I don't know that we ever have had to, besides twice, you said?
Twice we took less than what we listed it for, but usually we get way over.
We've taken offers less than listing, but we've never had to do like massive price cuts. Yeah.
Never cut your price. That's perfect. And a lot of that goes into doing the research ahead of time and knowing what your numbers are. Because if you price it right from the get-go, you typically don't have to make that reduction. So
I mean, yeah, we will like monitor sales activity as the project's going. If there's new data, suggest we can go higher, or if we need to be more realistic. But like we're never like too greedy, like shooting way over the moon on the list price. We always, get feedback from other people and try to price it to sell and at the price we need, so.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the other thing to remember too, is when you do that, when you're pricing it there, you only need one offer to get it done. And that's what you were saying, you had one showing, one offer, and typically that does it. If I get a lot of people that if they don't get 30 showings the first weekend, they're super nervous. And I'm like, guys, there might not be 30 buyers for that price point or that subdivision,
Well, I mean, we were so like we listed on a Thursday, like always, and we had that one showing and one offer before the weekend, but we had no showings lined up for the weekend. So we're like, all right, we got to jump on it and take this one. It's probably the buyer. So
yeah. Absolutely. That's awesome. And I remember when I got into the industry, we always used to say your first offer is your best offer. And so, now when you tell people that, they're like, oh no, I know I'm going to get 5 more. And then when they don't, I look at them like, told you so, so it is what it is. So definitely something to pay attention to and watch. But, we continue to watch the markets, not just in St. Louis, but across the country. And, what happens on the coast always ends up trickling to us. And we've seen it before. But what's funny is that, I have people say, well, the coasts are all, they're all crap right now. And they're not. If you look at the Northeast is doing phenomenal. And a lot of it goes back into supply and demand. It's simple economics. And people, I listen to all these podcasts and I listen to all these people talk and all this other stuff about the market. And a lot of times what it boils down to is how much is money? How much can I borrow money for right now? And what are my options? Do I have a ton of options or am I limited? Because if I'm limited on what I can buy, it means I'm going to have to just pick one and roll with it. People need housing. And so as that supply starts to increase, we will start to see those prices continue to plateau, level out. So it is interesting that we're seeing some decreases year over year throughout the country. But I think by at the end of this year, we will see an average across the country of, above, we'll be 1% or 2 over across the country, but just stay out of Florida unless you've got some cash and want to go buy. That's my biggest tip. So, and then before we kind of jump into different questions and stuff, I do want to, you guys know how involved I am at the state, national, and local levels. We had 2 humongous wins for this group. I mean, I can't even tell you how hard we worked on this stuff, how many hours I spent sitting in politicians' offices that I like or don't like, trying to get this pushed through. There were so many realtors across the state that were working on this, but this month, I was supposed to attend the signing of the bill, but I was on vacation with my kids, so I couldn't go, so I was a little upset. But 2 weeks ago, Governor Kehoe signed in House Bill 595 and House Bill 594. And House Bill 594 made Missouri the first state to eliminate any capital gains tax in the state of Missouri. So there is no longer a state capital gains tax in Missouri. And that is huge. And we are hoping that we can take that model and run it to the national level and make those changes at the national level, or at least reduce that capital gains. So that is a huge win for us at the state level here. House Bill 595 is another huge win for us because I don't know if you guys follow the news when it comes to the Tenant Bill of Rights and some of these tenant organizations in Kansas City and St. Louis that have been trying to force an agenda that would have forced landlords to accept Section 8 vouchers and would have forced landlords to not be able to scrutinize based on source of income, based on criminal history, based on previous rental history. Basically, what it would have done in Kansas City, what Kansas City did was the first application you got, you pretty much had to accept, no matter what that tenant looked like. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? And they said, we don't even care if they can afford it. If they apply and they want to live there, they should have the right to live there. I'm sorry, I would probably love to live in a gigantic mansion in Frontenac, but I can't afford it, so I'm not allowed to live there, period. And so what we did was, after we saw what happened in Kansas City, we immediately put our advocacy teams in place. We got bill sponsors for this. Some of those bill sponsors came right here from our area in St. Louis. And we have a bill signed by the governor that prohibits any political subdivision, any municipality or county from mandating you have to take a voucher, or they cannot limit or restrict how you approve your tenants based on source of income, rental related decisions, credit scores, criminal history, all of that. They can't tell you you have to accept something. And so that is a huge win for private property rights and for landlords across the state of Missouri. And what really just aggravated me to death was we proposed this bill, and then there was a few people in the Senate that came back and they said, we'll vote for it, we'll allow it to go through as long as you draw a circle around Kansas City and some of the surrounding counties in Kansas City, and that it wouldn't apply to them. And we said, no, this applies to all Missourians or no Missourians. And we were able to get it across the finish line, so it applies to the entire state. So landlords in Kansas City and Missouri, or in St. Louis and everywhere else, are protected because of this bill. So huge win for us, and the fact that we don't have to worry about being told we have to accept somebody based on other stuff. So very, very huge win for us. So that's kind of my little rundown, but I'd love to open it up to questions, see what you guys got and what you're thinking.
I have a general question on the market.
Yeah.
Any certain areas that you think are doing better or worse in terms of sitting longer or not, or any price ranges that seem to be doing better than others?
Yeah, I think I mean the golden egg that we've seen for the last 5 years has been under 300 in St. Charles County. If you've got a house under 300,000 in St. Charles County, it's pretty set. Even if it's an as-is one, if it fits the mold, it's pretty good. I think the other thing we're seeing is if you get into that $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 range, they're still moving, they're moving great, but they better have what you would expect a $600,000 to have in it. You know, we've seen several where, you know, someone puts a house on the market for 600, it's clean, it's pretty, but it doesn't have granite countertops, or it's got, you know, vinyl flooring throughout, the cheap vinyl flooring. It's got, you know, so we're seeing that. And again, these buyers can start to be a little bit more picky. They don't have to choose something in 30 minutes anymore. So if they have the ability to go through 4 or 5 different houses in a weekend now, and they're all priced very similar, but the finishes on one just aren't there, it's never going to sell. So you've got to price it according with those finishes. So I would say that's something we're seeing more of. I still see quite a market. The luxury market in our area is still really good. If you've got the potential to do a bigger flip at a higher price point, that gets you into that 800-900 or over $1 million range, we still have we've got quite a buyer pool for that range that's out there, especially in some of the areas. I keep hearing it over and over again. Something I never thought I would hear. I think I've even said it before on this call. People say St. Charles County doesn't have enough $1 million homes. I never thought I lived in $1 million county, to be honest with you. So, but they keep saying it. We just don't have it. And I think part of that reason is because prices have gotten so high. You can look at some brand new homes in a really nice subdivision, but you're on a postage stamp lot that's pushing $800,000-900,000 now. So, you know, $1 million home isn't what it used to be. But when you talk to people from all over the country and they ask, you know, what's your average home price in St. Louis? We're hovering somewhere around, you know, 300,000 across the entire metro. And when you look at that number, they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. But when you hammer down into what the numbers actually look like, zip code for zip code, it's a different ballgame. So different things out there.
Thanks, Matt.
Matt, you kind of brought up price drops a little bit ago, and Brian Johnson said he hadn't had any, but as because he's an awesome rehabber. But as a hard money lender, we have a lot of rehabbers out there, and some of them call me and say, "Dang, my house has been on the market for a month, and what should I do?" So generally, what I tell people is drop the price about 10 grand every 3 weeks, give or take. But what do you think? Is that good advice, or would you give them different advice?
I think a lot of it depends on where the initial price is. So as a realtor, most of the clients we work with, most of the clients we work with in our company, they all have a benchmark, and those benchmarks typically hover in the 50,000 range. So they can look up to 300 or to 350. Some of them, sometimes it's 325 or 425. But I think it just depends on where that price is within those benchmarks. So if you priced your house at, you know, 365, if a $10,000 price drop doesn't get you below that next true benchmark, but you might not need that. You might just need a $5,000 to put new eyes on it. And that's the other thing you got to realize is that every time you make a price drop, every time you post an open house, it's the MLS is blasting that out to buyers again. And so if somebody saw your house originally at 365.5 and has never gone back to it, but then 2 weeks later they get an email that says, hey, this price just dropped 5,000, and it draws their attention back to it, maybe now that's enough to look at it, get them in the house and purchase it. I am a huge fan of brainstorming with other professionals in the industry, whether it's your realtor, whether it's other investors, whether it's other friends of yours that are in the industry. I can't tell you how many times, people call me or they just come show up in my office and we sit down and we start going through numbers. And when you start talking out loud about some of these numbers, it makes a huge difference. And so what sounds good initially, sometimes when you dive deeper into it, you come up with a different number and a different outlook on that. And so I think before you just go to a flat $10,000 price reduction, maybe have those conversations and use somebody or a couple people as a sounding board that know that area, and go from there. And I think, that's what Brian and them do with their flips. is they dig into those numbers and they watch, because he's absolutely right. If a house hits the market 3 days before we're supposed to hit the market, and they have either undercut themselves drastically or they've overpriced tremendously, it can seriously affect your listing and how you price it. So if you're not watching that up until the day it goes live, you're missing it.
Yeah, I'm looking at, we track houses that are listed over 30 days, like 30 to 90 day period, and then after 90 days. And we've got 7 right now. And I look at their list price and our initial ARV. And I think it looks like all the ones that are sitting, they just listed so much higher.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
you list it, like, I feel like Jake and Brian are listing pretty competitively when they run their numbers, and they're trying to be on the lower end. Because when I look to it, your stats, that matches what I'm hearing. You have still have 46% going over list. So those people are probably listing pretty competitive, but then almost 50% are selling under. So I feel like it shows agents are still probably trying to figure out the market. Like, should we go low or high? And it seems
yeah.
like in this market, you need to go a little on the lower side to drive
Well,
action.
and Suzanne, I know you guys see this, I see it all the time, is people will come to us and they'll say, okay, we want to list at $380,000. Well, where did you get that number from? Well, there was one house 6 months ago that sold for $380,000. So that's what we want. If you only have one comp to justify your price, you've done something wrong, period. And I can't tell you how many times people come to us and they're like, we saw this house, it sold for this price, and that's what we want. That is not realistic. That is, one comp is not it. You've got to have a lot.
And I think too, something that I've been telling people is you have to look at list price. I don't care what it's sold for. Look at list price, because that list price of what that house originally sold for is going to tell you a story. Because sure, some houses could be selling over, but maybe they just had a couple people who really wanted that house. But realistically, all day long, it's what that list price was originally correct. They just
Yeah.
happened to get lucky.
And don't show me that one house that's 4 subdivisions over when there's 8 houses in that subdivision that have sold. So I don't care how much you like the subdivision 4 streets over. If you've got comps in the subdivision that your house is in, you have to use those. You have to pay attention to that. And if you bought a house based on a subdivision a mile away, shame on you.
And I also think sometimes flippers can get a little bit too caught up in their own numbers. Well, I need to list it here because that's how much I have into it. In buyers don't care. So sometimes it's better just to take a loss right away than to elongate that loss trying to sell it higher than it should.
Yeah.
I got a perfect hypothetical on this scenario. Okay. We just bought a house yesterday in St. Peter's. Had an ARV 370, 380. 2 or 3 days before we bought it, one of our comps that had sold last year was our high comp at 380, relisted again for 415, and it closed for 415, 3 days on the market. It's across Youngerman Road in a different neighborhood, about a half mile away, exact identical house though. So does that change our plans? Do we just go for their plan, or like, hey, should we be trying to get 400 now?
So two things to think about. Number one, if the floor plan is the same, if it's the exact same house, that's a good comp. You can use that comp. But the other thing is compare the subdivisions. So does the quality of your subdivision match the quality of that subdivision? If it does, then go for it. Then adjust your comps. If it doesn't, even though it's the exact same house, that subdivision that's a lower quality will bring that value down on that house. Even though the exact same house a half mile away sold for 415, if you're surrounded by a different quality in that other subdivision, it will affect that final number.
Yeah, I mean, it's same housing stock, same elementary zone, just
Then I would say adjust your number.
I also always look at comps in the neighborhood just to see, because sometimes I do feel like neighborhoods, for whatever random reasons, comp out. And if you do have plenty of comps in that neighborhood that are only in that 380 price range, I do think that could potentially affect you. But I don't know.
And what you want to do is if you list it and sell it 415 in that subdivision and all the houses around it, make sure you've got some literature in that house for the appraiser when he comes through, because he'll probably want it. So
Yeah.
I just had one, an appraiser called me and we were listed at 620 for 30 days with no offers. We dropped the price to 599.9, which is where I wanted to put it originally. Put it at 599.9 on a Thursday night. By Sunday, we had multiple offers, and sold it for right at ask price. And they went with that instead of a few dollars more because it was as is, very easy deal. And the appraiser called me and he said, I can't appraise this at 599.9. And he said, I don't know what you guys were thinking at 620. And I said, well, we did have multiple offers at 599.9. He said, you did? I said, yeah, within 24 hours of dropping the price, we had 3 offers at 599.9. And he said, oh, well, that kind of changes things for me. If there was interest and there was multiple interest, he said, let me relook at my numbers, and appraised it at 599.9. So I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, so definitely interesting.
Who else has a question for Matt, or just a question in general for the group? We have about 15 minutes left.
I have a question. So I'm starting to look at houses that are like in those more like expensive areas, like the Baldwins, the Ladus, that type of thing. And I'm just a little concerned that if we were to buy now and then be done by fall, is that really a good time to list those more, those more expensive houses? Like what would I expect in that? Like, because I know the other areas where I typically buy in, I know how those go, but in those higher areas, I'm not really too sure.
Higher area, lower area, I hate listing anytime between Thanksgiving and Christmas. If you can avoid that time, I'm not saying you can't sell stuff, because we can sell stuff all the time, but I would definitely, I don't think it's going to affect it too much. We've seen great numbers in spring and fall, and late fall too, across our area. So I think as long as you're not dropping it the day before Thanksgiving, I think you're doing okay. But I think, one thing that I truly believe in is having a strategic plan in place for when and how you're going to list that house. Brian said earlier, we list them on Thursdays, we get those. And so having that plan in place, and it's tough sometimes. God, you got contractors and I swear I'm going to be done by this day and it's 2 weeks later. And, so some of that stuff you can't avoid. Hi. So some of that stuff you can't avoid, but having a plan in place of when you're going to drop that house, it does matter. And so I think that if you can guarantee that you're going to take on a bigger project and a bigger price point, and you're going to be able to put it, live by October 1st or October 15th, I think you're going to be just fine. But you just gotta be strategic with that piece of it. So
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I haven't bit the bullet yet because I'm scared, but I mean, I think that's just kind of normal when you're moving into different markets, but we'll see what happens.
I think really getting to know the subdivisions that they're in, where they sit. I love some of the bigger projects, and I love seeing what can be done with some of those, because we've seen some amazing stuff, and Casey did one. Where is Casey? Oh, there he is. I see him down. He's this big on my screen. Casey did a big house. How big was that house that you did you put my favorite dog wash in, Casey?
That was like 2,500 square feet on the main level.
Yeah, so it was a big house, big project, and a big win, right? That was a really good one. And so I definitely you got to know your numbers really well with those bigger ones, though, simply because of the fact that you're going to have more into it than you normally do. And so if those numbers don't work, it can be a huge win or it can be a hard loss. So you got to really understand those numbers in those markets. So that's diving in deep and again, grabbing a sounding board, talking to somebody and saying, here's the subdivision that I'm thinking about. What do you think? And I always, one thing I love to do is when I sit down with anybody, I talk about what the conservative number is. what is my guarantee? I think I don't have a doubt in my mind, I wouldn't lose an ounce of sleep that you could sell the house for this much money. And typically, if you start with that number and work backwards, you can end up pretty well.
I also feel like too, with those bigger houses, always account for holding costs, because it's those holding costs that will eat you alive.
100%.
And so I would just make sure that's in your budget. And if you know you're going to be listing in the fall, maybe you just budget for an extra month or two of holding costs. Maybe you just plan on it taking 30 days to go under contract or something like that. That'll help you with those numbers. And with those nicer houses, make sure you're paying attention to layouts, and that you're treating above ground square footage differently than below ground square footage. I'm sure, Morgan, you know that, but that's been a theme of my week this week. And they're not even higher dollar, they're in regular neighborhoods that are in like the 250 or under range. Below grade square feet is not the same as above ground square feet. So when you're running comps, make sure to pay attention to that.
And if you utilize Zillow, just remember Zillow gives you total finished square footage. So if they say the house is 1,900 square feet, that's above grade and below grade. So we get that all the time. People come to me and they're like, Zillow says our house is 2,500 square feet. And I'm like, yeah, your house is not 2,500 square feet. So that is your basement and upstairs. So
I walked a less than 700 square foot house this week that they were telling me it's 1,500 square feet. And I'm like, no, it's not.
real quick before I forget, I'm gonna turn the screen. I wanted you guys to meet Sam. Sam is 18 years old, right?
Yep.
And started real estate school yesterday. So he is going to be a new agent soon, but he was sitting in listening to everything. So if you got kids at home that need a job, they all kid me that I recruit from high school. So let's go find some more agents. But welcome, Sam.
All right. Any other questions? I do think, Sam, it is so awesome that you start young. It is. I think there's so many people who wish they would start when they're 18. So I think that's awesome.
I have just a general question on appraisals for you all.
Yeah, for it.
Or Matthew, if you can answer this. When you're meeting the appraiser or kind of putting together that document for them, like I did a pretty large renovation over here in, believe it or not, Gary, Indiana, and
Oh, nice.
we think it's going to hit like upper twos.
Nice.
Believe it or not, things are turning around, but for the appraiser, is it typical that you sort of list out the cost of your general line items? So new cabinets and countertops were $15,000, like line item like that, or you just sort of list what was done and then sort of a total all in cost, or what's your guys' like favorite approach to that?
So Brian or Suzanne, you guys can jump in too on this one, but I have never found too many appraisers that love to know what you spent on countertops and cabinets.
Okay.
They like to know what you did. I've gotten feedback from appraisers that said if you want to leave a list of all the upgrades you did or what you put in, they don't care if you spent $30,000 in cabinets. But the fact that you did replace the cabinets, that helps.
Okay.
One of the things that I think works the best is if you can really highlight the comps in the area that you can use to justify. So you can say, we came up with this price, we listed at this price, or, based on these 3 or 4 houses that truly justify your square footage. And that's the other thing too, is understanding that price per square foot matters to them.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people are like, well, this one sold for way more than what I'm selling it for. But yeah, it was also 1,000 square feet bigger, which when you do the price per square foot, it makes yours cheaper. So paying attention to that. Number 2, listing those upgrades and the updates, not by what you spent on them, but kind of some of the highlights of what you did.
Okay.
And then number 3, giving them a little bit of background on what the competition was for that house. So, if you give just a quick little scenario or a little synopsis that says, we were listed for 2 weeks, we had 3 offers, and this is, what we ended up with, something along those lines. But Brian, Suzanne, you guys can chime in on that, but that's kind of what I've found.
Okay.
I agree 100%. The only thing I would add to that is if you just recently bought it, you flipped it, or you're keeping it as a rental, share the story about why you bought it at a discount. Because if they see you made 100, if you say they see you bought it at 250 and you're selling it for 350, they understanding the upgrades is important, but equally as important is understanding that the why you were able to buy it at a discount.
Yeah, great point, Brian. Sweet. So do you have offers on, is it done, Brad, or are you,
Getting ready to list it. Probably, we have just a couple of things to do this week, so we'll probably list it like a week from this Thursday.
gotcha.
And
Well, you're in a
for-
good market. I mean, numbers around you are showing, 1 to almost 3% increase year over year on prices. So looks like you
Yeah.
guys are holding pretty strong.
There is a lot of people moving into Northwest Indiana from Chicago, myself included.
Yeah,
So there is definitely some migration over to the state. This property in particular is on the west side of Gary, so it's even closer to Chicagoland. And that was sort of our thought behind this. It's classic like Chicago brick bungalow. It had a, beautiful like wood floors. They just needed to be finished, and it was in fantastic shape. We turned a 3-1 into a 6-2. We added 3 more bedrooms and a full bathroom downstairs.
wow, that's awesome. That is very cool.
But like you were saying, I'm definitely aware of the fact that like those rehab things downstairs, the bedrooms and all that, like they're not going to count as much because they are below grade.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
But we're
And-
hoping the overall appeal of a house that has this many bedrooms and can accommodate related living or even 2 families theoretically,
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Well, good luck with it. Wish you nothing
Thank
but
you.
the best. Hopefully you reach that number.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we are like almost at 1. Anyone have any other last minute questions or when they'd like to share or challenge? All right. Well, thank you all so much. Matt, thank you for coming on and sharing all that knowledge. We always appreciate you on this call.
Absolutely.
Rachel, I'm going to pass this over to you for you to wrap us up.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Matt. I always enjoy getting to have you on Buyers Club Live. If anyone needs an agent or is looking to move their license, definitely reach out to Matt with Magnolia. They're an awesome brokerage. We had some other vendors on the call today. Thanks, Casey, for always joining us with Faster Funds, and Dustin with his coaching program. I think that's a majority of you guys. Oh, we had Roger Wallach on too. So if you need an attorney, you can reach out to him. But we will see you all next week. Next week, we are actually going to do a case study from Aiden. He did a house in Winsville that he's going to talk about, one of his flips, which will be a lot of fun. And then we also announced our speaker for the upcoming meetup. So we've got Pat Tanner talking in August, which will be a lot of fun at the in-person meetup on August 21st. So anyway, let me know if you guys need anything next week, and we'll see y'all next Wednesday.
Bye, guys. Thanks for having me on.